American records detail the machinery behind this endurance. By 1944, U.S. Army Air Force's bases across England operate with assembly line efficiency. Ground crews refuel fighters in minutes, not hours. Fuel trucks arrive on schedule. Ammunition belts are pre-packed. Engines are inspected with practiced speed. This is not improvisation. It is industrial discipline applied to war. The Luftwaffe, by contrast, faces fuel shortages so severe that training hours are cut and combat sorties are rationed. German pilots often take off unsure if they will have enough fuel for extended pursuit, let alone multiple engagements. The emotional contrast becomes unavoidable in the air. German pilots, trained to prize technical skill and tactical precision, find themselves facing an enemy whose strength seems to regenerate. The sky, once governed by predictable limits, now feels crowded and hostile. American fighters do not merely protect bombers, they hunt. They loiter near airfields, intercept climbing interceptors, and return after refueling to repeat the process. The recurring symbol of this transformation is fuel itself, the invisible lifeblood of flight. For the Americans, fuel flows. For the Germans, it vanishes. Documented German assessments reflect a growing unease. Intelligence summaries note that American fighters remain over target areas far longer than previously estimated. Pilot memoirs written after the war describe the psychological strain of facing an opponent who never seems to tire. The sky ceases to feel like neutral space and begins to resemble occupied territory. American pilots, backed by abundant fuel and replacement aircraft, can afford mistakes. German pilots cannot. Each engagement carries the weight of scarcity. This imbalance changes more than tactics, it alters belief. Luftwaffe pilots had been taught that superior skill and courage could compensate for numerical inferiority. But no amount of skill can refuel an empty tank. As American fighters reappear again and again, the realization sets in that this war is being decided not only by bravery, but by capacity. The Americans are fighting with a depth that Germany can no longer match. Every return of an American fighter after refueling becomes a quiet announcement. This is a war of endurance, and endurance belongs to industry. The symbolism of fuel extends beyond aviation. It represents abundance harnessed to purpose. The American system delivers gasoline refined across oceans, transported through secure supply chains, and poured into aircraft with mechanical regularity. This abundance is not chaotic. It is organized, measured, and shared across a vast alliance. Democracy here is not abstract ideology, but a functioning network that keeps engines running. In contrast, the Luftwaffe war effort, centralized and strained, starves its own pilots of the very resource they need to fight. As months pass, the effect compounds. American air superiority grows not only because of better aircraft, but because pilots survive long enough to gain experience. German losses mount. Replacement pilots arrive with fewer hours and less fuel for training. The reappearance of American fighters after refueling becomes a recurring nightmare, a reminder that the enemy's strength resets while Germany's diminishes. The sky becomes a ledger, and every engagement records the same imbalance. By the time Allied forces land in Normandy, the outcome in the air is no longer in doubt. The bombers fly deeper, the escorts stay longer, and German resistance thins. What began as a tactical surprise becomes a strategic truth. The American fighters' return after refueling was never just about aviation. It was about a society capable of sustaining pressure without collapse. In the epilogue of this moment, the winter sky over Germany fades into memory, but its lesson remains. Freedom in this war is not only defended by ideals or speeches, it is defended by supply lines, by trained crews, by fuel flowing when it is needed most. For the German pilots who watched American fighters disappear and then reappear, the sky revealed a larger reality. Abundance, when organized in the service of an open society, becomes a force as decisive as any weapon. And once that truth took hold, the outcome of the air war and the war itself began to feel inevitable. January 1944. Somewhere above the gray quilt of Western Germany, frost hangs in the air at 25,000 feet, biting through oxygen masks and cockpit seals. Engine vibrations travel through aluminum frames like a second pulse. Below, rivers coil through farmland, dull and silent. Above, contrails stitch white scars across a winter sky. For German fighter pilots climbing to intercept the bombers, this altitude has always meant a brief, predictable equation. Engage the American escorts, wait for their fuel to run thin, then strike the bombers once the enemy fighters are forced to turn back. It is a calculation refined over years of air war. On this day, that calculation will quietly collapse. The moment matters because the air war over Europe is not merely a contest of aircraft and pilots, but of systems. By early 1944, the strategic bombing campaign has become the central artery of Allied pressure against the Third Reich. American bombers arrive in daylight, methodical and relentless, targeting factories, rail yards, and oil plants. German defense doctrine depends on attrition. Bleed the escorts, survive the first wave, then attack the bombers when the skies should belong to Germany again. For months, this logic has held. American fighters, brave but limited by range, have escorted bombers partway, then peeled away, leaving the heavy formations exposed. German pilots expect this rhythm as surely as they expect flak bursts around the bomber streams. What they expect on this winter day is familiar. They expect the American fighters to appear briefly, fight hard, then vanish westward toward the Channel. They expect fuel limits to impose mercy. They expect endurance to favor the defender. But what they experience instead unsettles them in a way no single dogfight ever could. After the first engagements, when fuel gauges suggest the Americans must be turning back, the German pilots circle, climbing again, scanning empty sky. Then, unexpectedly, the American fighters return. Fresh, aggressive, unhurried. They reappear not as survivors, but as if reborn. This shock is not imagined. Combat reports from the Luftwaffe in late 1943 and early 1944 begin to note a disturbing pattern. American escorts remaining longer than anticipated, appearing deeper into German airspace, and returning after breaks that should have ended their presence. The explanation lies not in pilot bravado, but in logistics. The United States has quietly solved a problem of distance. Long-range fighters, most notably the P-51 Mustang, have entered the theater in numbers. Equipped with external drop tanks, they can escort bombers all the way to targets deep inside Germany. More critically, they can disengage, land at forward bases, refuel rapidly, and return to the air in the same operational window.